Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. He built his dream home to escape the tyranny of HOA rules. No beige mandates, no mailbox drama. But when a forged letter, a $30,000 fine, and a war of intimidation arrive, one ex-lawyer takes on a corrupt HOA empire and uncovers a suburban conspiracy no one saw coming. It all started with a plot of land and a dream to finally build a home without a single HOA board breathing down my neck about mailbox height or approved neutral tones. After spending over a decade dealing with building permits, code violations, and enough architectural review boards to give anyone an ulcer, I decided to cash out, sold my legal firm in Plano, and bought myself a gorgeous piece of land just outside Briarwood Park. A pocket of unincorporated territory not covered by the Homeowners Association. That part was important, crucial. I had documents, maps, and official county stamps that said so. No HOA, no Karens. Just me, the blueprints, and some dusty Central Texas soil. The house I built? A one-story Texas ranch in red-brown brick, dark slate shingles, steel gutters, clean lines, a little edge to it. Modern but grounded. Took 6 months. Every brick laid with care, every inspection passed with flying colors, city signed off. Fire marshal approved the layout and spacing. Engineers triple-checked the utilities. The permit history was cleaner than my grandmother's church gloves. The funny thing about building something of your own is that you notice the silence at first, the kind of peace that doesn't come easy these days. That first night in the house, I sat on the back porch with a glass of rye, watching the dusk bleed over the hills and thought, damn, I finally did it. No neighbors telling me to take down wind chimes or repaint my eaves beige. That piece lasted exactly 2 months and 3 days. The letter came in a thick white envelope, the kind that tries to look official by being heavier than necessary. Return address, Briarwood Park, HOA. I remember frowning because my place was outside their jurisdiction, legally, geographically, historically. But there it was. Inside the envelope, a single-page document with an HOA logo at the top, followed by several paragraphs of sanctimonious nonsense. The letter accused me of violating the architectural harmony and aesthetic integrity of the Briarwood Park residential community. Their words. Apparently my home, my legally permitted, professionally inspected, city-approved home, was an act of visual aggression and had caused irreversible damage to community cohesion and property values. The cherry on top, a fine of $30,000 for aesthetic damages. There was a signature at the bottom, Karen Ellis, President, Briarwood Park HOA. Of course, her name was Karen. I stared at the letter, flipping it over as if there might be a punchline on the back. There wasn't. Instead, the envelope also contained a multi-page violation assessment report that made less sense the longer I read it. They claimed my brickwork violated the approved color palette, that my dark shingles were discordant with the light tones required of primary structures, that my home's orientation on the lot created a visual incongruence that could cause emotional distress for neighboring residents. And I repeat, my lot was not in the HOA. I didn't waste time. First thing the next morning, I drafted a certified response with the help of a paralegal I used to mentor. I attached the property deed, the official city zoning maps, a copy of the county plat showing the HOA boundary lines, and my signed permit approvals, all notarized. I also included a brief letter of my own which read, in so many polite legalese terms, piss off and don't write again. But just to be thorough, I added one more document, a formal cease and desist notice, citing harassment under Texas Civil Code 16.3, along with a warning that further attempts to extract funds would be treated as attempted fraud. I sent it off by courier and made sure I got signature confirmation. 2 days later, I received it back, signed for by Karen herself. That should have been the end of it. But see, people like Karen don't know how to lose quietly. 2 mornings later, I woke up, stepped outside with my coffee, and found 3 signs staked in the public grass strip across the road from my property, all from Briarwood Park HOA. One read, unapproved structure. Another, community standards violation. And the last one, my personal favorite, declared, devaluing neighboring homes since 2023. The HOA had officially declared war, and I hadn't even finished unpacking my books. The signs didn't disappear overnight. In fact, by the end of the week, there were more. They started sprouting like weeds. Non-compliant construction. Violator lot. One had a QR code that linked to the HOA's digital neighborhood violations dashboard. Yeah, that's a thing. They built a whole damn webpage just to shame me. That's when the Facebook posts started. Karen apparently wasn't just president of the HOA. She was also queen of the local Facebook group Briarwood Proud. She posted a 4-paragraph tirade titled, "Preserving Our Community Standards in the Face of Hostile Architecture." She used words like aggression, aesthetic terrorism, and, my personal favorite, brick-based intimidation. Photos of my house, taken from across the street, were posted without my consent. One neighbor commented, "Looks like a penitentiary." Another said, "It's giving Waco compound vibes." The online mob was small but vocal and contagious. Neighbors who had waved at me just days earlier now avoided eye contact. Some crossed the street when I walked past with my dog, Scout. A couple even left anonymous notes in my mailbox. One said, "Just sell and leave." Another read, "We don't want a bunker ruining our cul-de-sac." All because I built a brick house. The best part, Karen sent another letter. This one was thicker. Inside, a second assessment report by some guy named Todd Remmer, who claimed to be a private property value consultant. According to his extremely scientific opinion, the presence of my house had resulted in a measurable psychological devaluation effect on the surrounding homes. The estimated damages? Now $52,000. Apparently, dark shingles and red brick were now a Class A economic hazard. At that point, I contacted Daniel. He's an attorney I've worked with for years, straight shooter, sharp as hell, and no stranger to HOA antics. He looked over the documents, chuckled once, then asked if I wanted to go scorched earth now or wait until they buried themselves deeper. I told him I wanted them to dig a deeper hole first. He drafted a formal demand for immediate retraction of all claims, removal of signage, and public apology for defamation. We sent it to Karen via certified mail and emailed it to the entire HOA board for good measure. The deadline was 10 business days. Karen's response, not a word. But by the next morning, the signs had doubled, and they were bigger now, glossy, professionally printed. She'd paid actual money to escalate this. That night, I caught someone taking photos of my backyard through the side fence. I turned the floodlights on and watched a lanky teenager sprint off into the bushes, drop his clipboard, and hop the neighbor's fence like a feral raccoon. I picked up the clipboard. It had the HOA letterhead on it, a form labeled Visual Inspection Report. The next day, I saw the same kid walking a dog 2 blocks away, only this time in a Briarwood HOA polo. I snapped a photo, posted it to a private legal watchdog forum I still have access to. Within hours, 2 other users messaged me. Turns out the HOA was paying local teens under the table to observe and document houses they considered violations. Not licensed inspectors, not city officials, teenagers. I filed a complaint with the County Code Enforcement Office. No violations, they said. I filed one with the City Zoning Board. No infractions. I submitted a record request to the HOA's nonprofit filings. All legit on paper. That's when I started compiling my own file. I printed every letter, screenshot every Facebook post, archived every neighbor comment and every insult. I set up 4 security cameras around the perimeter. Scout got upgraded to a GPS collar, and then I got an invitation, an actual paper invitation, gold trim and all. You are cordially invited to attend the monthly Briarwood Park HOA board meeting. Special topic, unregulated construction and the decline of neighborhood standards. Held at a local church. Open to the public. Karen's idea of diplomacy, apparently. I didn't RSVP, but I showed up anyway. Wore my best suit. Sat right in the front row. Watched as Karen stood at the podium and clicked through a PowerPoint titled Contagion of Code Non-Compliance. Slide 3. A full-screen photo of my house. Under it, the beginning of the end. Someone in the back gasped. I think it was for dramatic effect. Karen talked about the social fabric, about protecting property values, and about the moral obligation to defend the neighborhood from individualist defiance. I raised my hand. She ignored me. I raised it again. Someone from the board leaned in and whispered to her. She finally nodded. "Mr. Marshall," she said, not even trying to hide the contempt. "You have a comment?" I stood up. "Just wanted to remind everyone here that my home is not within Briarwood Park HOA's legal jurisdiction. Any further attempts to collect funds or harass me or my property will be handled through the courts. I'll be filing a formal complaint within the week. And if you think I'm bluffing, you're welcome to test me." Dead silence. And then someone clapped. Just one. Quiet, awkward, but it echoed like a bomb. I walked out without another word. If Karen thought this would scare me off, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I didn't even get a weekend of peace after that meeting. Monday morning, right when I sat down with a cup of black coffee and an optimistic belief that the world might calm itself for 5 minutes, I heard the mail truck stop outside. The envelope this time wasn't heavy and pretentious like the first one. It was thin, deceptively harmless, like a rattlesnake pretending to nap. Inside was a single sheet, a copy of a board decision record, stamped with the Briarwood Park HOA seal. The document stated very confidently that the parcel known as Marshall Lot was now formally under the authority of the HOA due to a recent amendment expanding their jurisdictional perimeter. It even included a signature from me, my name scrawled in a warped imitation of cursive that looked like someone taught a toddler to forge with crayons. They were escalating from harassment to open fraud, and they were stupid enough to think I wouldn't notice. I called the county clerk's office and drove down that afternoon, documents in hand. I walked straight up to the counter and laid the HOA's fraudulent amendment next to the legitimate plat survey from when I bought the property. The clerk squinted at both, then turned to the supervisor. When government employees start whispering, you know something's rotten enough to make even bureaucracy nervous. Turns out Karen had submitted a series of revised boundary documents to the county registry, documents that didn't have a single legitimate notarization or official approval. Pure fiction. She had simply decided that my lot was now hers to control. And, apparently, she didn't stop with me. 3 other homeowners in the so-called expansion zone had also been targeted, each one voluntarily added to HOA jurisdiction, with signatures that didn't match their driver's licenses if you squinted really hard, or at all. That's when I realized this wasn't personal, yet. It was a scheme, a revenue pipeline disguised as community guardianship. Karen had been quietly annexing houses, adding them to the HOA roster, then finding the hell out of them for the most minor things. Wrong porch light color, Halloween decorations exceeding thematic boundaries, garden gnomes posing trip hazards, scam with lawns. Before leaving the county office, I made certified copies of every fraudulent document bearing my name, evidence bags included. The clerk's supervisor slipped me her card and said, "If you pursue criminal action, I'd be very interested to testify." That was promising. When I returned home, I found a neighbor waiting by my mailbox, John Bradley. I'd seen him around the edges of Facebook arguments, always the voice of reason. He offered a sympathetic smile, hands tucked into his jacket pockets like a guy who spent his life apologizing for other people. "Heard about the meeting," he said. "Gotta admit it was impressive watching you call Karen out." I gave a cautious nod. It was nice hearing support from someone who wasn't my attorney. "Appreciate that. Seems like this whole thing's becoming a circus." John made a disgusted noise. Briarwood's always had a few control freaks, but Karen, she's different. Ever since she took over, everything's gotten aggressive. He leaned in conspiratorially. "If you need anything, help with community stuff, witnesses, whatever, I've got your back." That should have felt reassuring, and for a brief moment, it did. But I've dealt with enough people in courtrooms to know that when someone volunteers their loyalty too early, too eagerly, they usually want something. Still, I thanked him, exchanged numbers, and watched him walk back toward his pristine beige house several streets over. Scout sniffed after him like he smelled something funny. Smart dog. As evening fell, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered with my lawyer voice, dry as sand and twice as abrasive. A calm male voice replied, "Mr. Marshall, my name is Aaron Greenwood. I'm a member of the HOA Executive Board. I'd like to speak privately. It's about Karen." Well, hell. When a snake calls you to warn about another snake, you don't know whether to listen or hang up. Aaron cleared his throat. Some of us don't agree with how she handles things. There are concerns, legal concerns. Meet me tomorrow, 3 in the afternoon, at the cafe on Maple Road. I can help you, and you can help us. He hung up before I could respond. So now I had a forged signature, fraudulent boundary amendments, mystery documents in a county file, a nervous HOA board member whispering mutiny, and one neighbor whose sudden friendship smelled like cheap cologne covering up rot. This was no longer a nuisance. This was a conspiracy. And I was just getting started. The cafe on Maple Road wasn't the sort of place you expect conspiracies to hatch. It had the faint smell of burnt espresso and disinfectant, with fake plants in every corner and a jazz playlist that hadn't been updated since the Obama administration. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a booth with a clear view of the entrance. Old habit. Aaron Greenwood walked in right on time. He was one of those guys who always looked like he'd just stepped off a golf course. Pastel polo, khakis pressed within an inch of their lives, loafers without socks. He held a paper folder under one arm and wore the smile of a man who knew secrets, but wouldn't tell them until he'd squeezed out the last ounce of leverage. We shook hands. His grip was dry and calculated. "I'll get to the point," he said as he slid into the booth across from me. Not everyone on the HOA board agrees with Karen's methods, but she's persuasive. Persuasive, I repeated. Is that what we're calling forgery now? His smile didn't fade, but his eyes twitched. Look, I'm not here to debate legality. I'm here because I think this is getting out of control. You think? He leaned in slightly. You've made her nervous. That's not easy. She's had a free hand for years, rewriting bylaws, redefining borders, cooking up fines like they're Girl Scout cookies. But now, you've got documents. You've got a case. And she knows it. I'm filing in county court next week, I said flatly. Unless you're here to confess, I'm not sure what you want. Aaron tapped the folder on the table. Just a friendly offer. Walk away from this. You'll get a letter voiding your fines. A quiet agreement that your lot's not in the HOA. Official this time. No more signs, no more Facebook drama. Peace. And in return, he tilted his head. You don't file. You don't go public. No lawyers. No judge. There it was. I leaned back. And what if I say no? His expression cooled like someone turned off the life support behind his eyes. Then, Robert, someone's bound to look into your past. See, you were in legal practice for years. Built permits, zoning approvals, land deals, and I've heard stories, little ones, rumors about favors, about fast-tracked approvals. You sure you want the spotlight? My jaw tightened. It wasn't what he said. It was the way he said it. Not like a man bluffing, but like someone who thought he had a scalpel to your throat and expected you to thank him for the surgery. Let me save you the trouble, I said. Go dig. There's nothing there but dust and a stack of ethics awards. But if you show up with a fake scandal, I'll bury whoever brings it. Aaron didn't flinch. He just stood up, adjusted his watch, and dropped the folder on the table. Sometimes peace is the smarter win. Then he walked out. I didn't open the folder right away. I sat there, staring at my coffee until it went cold. When I finally looked inside, there were mock-ups, an unsigned letter from the HOA apologizing for any confusion, a release form for my alleged fines, and a draft NDA. It wasn't a peace offering. It was hush money. I drove straight to Daniel's office. He scanned the documents, raised one eyebrow, then handed them back like they were contaminated. Classic intimidation by paper, he said. We'll record your statement. But also, we've got to go on offense. That night, I installed 2 more cameras. Meanwhile, John Bradley texted me, if you need someone to speak at a hearing, I'm in. HOA has crossed the line. I thanked him. But now I watched every word I sent. And then came the straw that shattered the camel's spine. I received a package from the county assessor's office. Inside was an updated parcel record listing my lot as under HOA review. Someone had submitted a change request to flag my property for community oversight. No legal basis, no precedent, no notification. The form was signed by Karen Ellis and approved by a notary who, as I discovered with a bit of digging, was her niece. They were tightening the noose. But I'd seen nooses before, and this time I was holding the knife. Daniel and I didn't waste time. The next morning, we filed a formal complaint with the county district court alleging jurisdictional overreach, document forgery, and targeted harassment. That alone made us feel a bit better. But this wasn't just about standing up to a petty HOA anymore. This was about dragging a sewer system into the daylight and letting everyone get a good look at the rats swimming in it. Still, filing a lawsuit wasn't going to be enough. We needed more. Proof, paper trails, a smoking gun, the kind of thing that made judges raise their eyebrows and prosecutors lean forward. And as luck, or divine spite, would have it, the smoking gun showed up 3 days later, right on my front porch. She was about 5'3", somewhere in her 60s, and wore orthopedic sneakers with the purpose-driven pace of someone who'd seen too much. Her name was Edna Lang. former treasurer of the Briarwood Park HOA. "I quit last year," she said, standing stiffly with a manila folder pressed to her chest. "Thought it was just micromanagement and control issues. Turns out it was fraud. The real kind." I invited her in, gave her tea. Scout liked her immediately, which was a good sign. She laid out the folder on my kitchen table, and what she showed me was damning. Expense reports, payment ledgers, and screenshots of Venmo transfers made from the HOA's community improvement account. Except they weren't for landscaping or signage. They were for luxury car rentals, spa services, a 5-night stay at a beachfront resort in Florida where Karen had allegedly gone for a HOA leadership summit. There was no summit. But there were Instagram photos, sunset cocktails, poolside yoga, and a caption that read, "Working hard to preserve community values." Karen was embezzling money. Not only that, Edna also had emails, real ones. Messages from Karen to the board requesting pre-approval for flexible reimbursement practices. One read, "As the face of the HOA, it's important I remain presentable and mobile, hence the Range Rover rental. Residents expect a certain standard." Another email included a PDF titled "Suggested Talking Points If Asked About Budget Questions," which, I kid you not, included the phrase, "Redirect concern toward aesthetic non-compliance from disruptive residents," i.e. Marshall. They were literally scripting deflection. We made copies of everything, scanned it, backed it up 3 different ways. Daniel's eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning when I dropped the documents on his desk. "Financial fraud opens the door to state-level prosecution," he said. "This isn't just HOA territory anymore, it's criminal." We filed a supplemental motion to expand our civil suit into a petition for a formal audit of the HOA's finances. And while the legal gears began to turn, I went looking for a little more dirt. And I found it, on 4 wheels. It was raining when I drove past the local gym and saw Karen's infamous white Range Rover parked across 2 spots, just as arrogant as its owner. Something about the tags looked wrong, too clean, too temporary. I circled back, parked, and waited. 15 minutes later, Karen strolled out in tennis gear and drove off. Once she was gone, I pulled up the footage from one of my security cameras, an old clip from 2 weeks ago, and paused at the frame where she'd pulled up to my house in that exact SUV, different plates. I started cross-referencing timestamps, plate numbers, and eventually tracked it all through a contact at the DMV records office who owed me a favor from back in my practicing days. Result? She had swapped the tags between 2 different vehicles. One registered to her, the other to a rental company, paid for using HOA funds. With the new footage, Daniel filed a request for a preliminary injunction and a formal referral to the district attorney's office. We didn't just have mismanagement now. We had misuse of nonprofit funds, falsification of records, and vehicular fraud. To pour just a little more salt into her wound, I forwarded the gym footage and plate swap evidence to the Facebook group Briarwood Proud under an anonymous account. Within hours, it was shared, screenshotted, and dissected by people who hadn't even looked at my house twice before. Karen went dark online for the first time in weeks. But just as I allowed myself a brief, satisfying exhale, I found a new message in my mailbox. This time, not from Karen. It was anonymous. No return address. No signature. Just one printed sentence on plain white paper. "You're not the only one who can leak things." Inside was a photocopy of a years-old zoning deal from my old practice. One that had been public record, but manipulated to make it look like I'd approved something without the proper review. Sloppy, amateurish, and easily debunked, but it told me something very clear. Aaron Greenwood was making good on his threat. It was going to get nastier, dirtier, but now I had something they didn't. The truth, the files, and an old bulldog of a lawyer who lived for depositions and public humiliation. Game on. The courthouse in Collin County doesn't look like much, just another beige box with bad lighting and echoey hallways. But when I walked through those double doors that Monday morning, it might as well have been the Coliseum. Except the lions wore loafers, and the gladiators carried leather briefcases instead of swords. Our hearing wasn't technically a trial yet, just the preliminary round to get a judge to take our case seriously. But with the weight of what we'd gathered, it already felt like the first real swing. Daniel prepped everything down to the syllable. Our motion included the fraudulent boundary expansion documents, the doctored signature claiming my consent, the the HOA's misrepresentation of jurisdiction in official correspondence, screenshots of Facebook defamation, Edna Lang's full affidavit and financial documentation, photos and time-stamped footage of the license plate swap, and a forensic breakdown of how Karen used the HOA's nonprofit funds like her own credit card. It was a mountain, a big, ugly, damning mountain of paperwork that smelled like cooked books and control issues. Karen arrived flanked by 2 attorneys from a mid-tier firm in Plano. She wore a navy blue pantsuit, a face that pretended to radiate community concern, and enough foundation to pave a driveway. She avoided looking at me. Her lawyers didn't. Inside, Judge Whitaker, an older man with a comb-over that had surrendered long ago, read through the first few pages, then looked over his glasses at Karen's team. "You're asserting this man's home is under your HOA's authority?" "Yes, Your Honor," her lead counsel replied smoothly. "Our client maintains that the HOA's expansion procedures—" "Let me stop you right there," Whitaker said, flipping a page, "because I'm holding a notarized county plat map that says otherwise, and a copy of a deed that predates your expansion, signed by the city, not your client." He wasn't smiling. We hadn't even hit page 5, and the room was already starting to sweat. Things really got fun when we called our first witness, John Bradley. I had mixed feelings watching him walk up to the stand. The so-called good neighbor, the guy who had offered to speak for me, all while feeding information back to Karen behind my back. But I'd confronted him the week before, with proof. "Emails, John, don't lie to me. I have them. From your burner account to Karen's HOA address, meeting times, status updates. Hell, one even called me paranoid and trigger-happy." He broke, like wet drywall. So now, here he was, testifying for us as part of a cooperation deal we worked out with the DA's office, immunity for full transparency, and what he said nuked the whole facade. He admitted he'd been approached by Karen a month before my house was even finished, that she asked him to monitor construction, report conversations, take photos discreetly, and steer me away from legal action. For his trouble, he received 2 community compensation checks, each for $5,000, signed off by Karen under the heading Neighborhood Enhancement Initiatives. He testified to watching her sign my name on a document, said he was there in her kitchen, said she laughed while doing it. Even Karen's lawyers couldn't hide their panic. One asked to pause for a sidebar, which Judge Whitaker denied with a grunt and a wave of his hand. Next came Edna. She walked slowly, but when she spoke, the air in the room sharpened. She laid it out. Years of misuse of HOA funds, secret reimbursements, late-night board votes held without quorum, and false claims on expense reports. She even brought up a time Karen approved a reimbursement for community signage that turned out to be a Bluetooth speaker and 2 cases of wine, both used for her birthday party. The document spoke louder than she did. Labeled, itemized, annotated with bank transfer IDs. But the final nail came with the audio. Daniel played the recording I made with Aaron Greenwood. The moment where he threatened to dig up dirt, to plant stories, to manufacture a scandal if I didn't walk away. The judge sat very still through the whole thing. When it finished, he looked directly at Karen for the first time since proceedings began. "Miss Ellis," he said, voice low but hard, "you have one chance to explain yourself before I forward this entire file to the Attorney General's office. I suggest you speak wisely." Karen stood, and for the first time in this entire nightmare, she looked scared. Her lips moved, but nothing came out at first. When sound finally escaped, it was a mixture of legal buzzwords and faux sincere apologies. She tried to pivot. Claimed the expansion was done in the best interest of the neighborhood, that communication breakdowns led to misunderstandings, and that any personal use of funds was accidental and reimbursed. It was pathetic. Judge Whitaker didn't even respond to it. He simply turned to Daniel. "I'm granting full injunctive relief," he said. "Effective immediately, the Briarwood Park HOA is barred from any contact with Mr. Marshall or his property. All fines are to be nullified, and I'm ordering a third-party audit of their finances with oversight by the county controller." He looked back at Karen. "And I'm forwarding this case to the Collin County District Attorney for further review." Then his gavel came down like thunder. We won the motion. But more than that, we'd cracked it wide open. Whitaker's referral meant state investigators would take over. Criminal charges weren't just possible now. They were probable. As Karen gathered her things with trembling fingers, Aaron Greenwood, seated 2 rows behind, lowered his head in his hands. His career was over. So was hers. So was the charade. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. The courtroom was still echoing with the gavel's last strike when Karen Ellis vanished, not metaphorically. She physically disappeared from the courthouse like a disgraced magician slipping off stage. 1 minute, she was collecting her leather folder. The next, gone, leaving behind her counsel a few loose papers and the quiet whimper of a reputation being buried alive. 2 days later, her face was on the local news. President of HOA under investigation for fraud and document forgery, read the chyron under a less than flattering mugshot taken outside her gated community's front gate. She'd been cornered by a local news crew while trying to slip into her car without comment. Spoiler alert, she failed. It snowballed fast. The state attorney general's office took hold of the audit. Investigators uncovered 4 more instances of falsified consent forms used to add properties into the HOA without legal authority, some dating back over 2 years. At least 10 residents had been paying dues, fines, and so-called beautification surcharges under threat of lien or litigation, all based on forged agreements and post-dated annexation acts. 3 of them came forward publicly, and the press, oh boy, they ate it up. Within a week, Briarwood Park went from award-winning residential community to civic horror show in cul-de-sac packaging. Even national outlets picked up the story. One article titled "When HOA Turns Mafia, a Texas Homeowner's Fight for Freedom" ran in a Sunday investigative column. They quoted me, of course, only they cleaned up my language a bit. Karen Ellis was arrested 12 days after our hearing. The charges: fraud, embezzlement, forgery, abuse of nonprofit resources, and my personal favorite, tampering with government documents. Bail was denied on account of flight risk. Aaron Greenwood got picked up next. His role in the shakedown attempt, combined with the audio and digital evidence, landed him a plea deal. 3 years probation, a 5-figure fine, and a lifetime ban from any civic or HOA-related position. Honestly, a slap on the wrist, but enough to mark him as toxic in every suburban boardroom for the next 30 years. And John Bradley. He vanished from the neighborhood quietly, with no fanfare, no apology. Last I heard, he sold his house below market rate and moved in with a relative in Waco. Funny how poetic that turned out to be. But the most satisfying piece came in a plain envelope marked District Court of Collin County with a judge's seal I now knew very well. The letter inside wasn't long. It simply read, "Effective immediately, the nonprofit entity known as Briarwood Park Homeowners Association is hereby dissolved by court order pursuant to Title II, Subtitle B, Chapter 22 of the Texas Business Organizations Code. Remaining funds to be reallocated to the Collin County Homeowner Legal Defense Fund. Dissolved. Gone. Dead." Just like that. The HOA that tried to annex my home, fine me into submission, rewrite boundaries, manipulate public opinion, and wage psychological war over architectural tone was gone. I framed that letter right next to my property deed. Not out of spite. Okay, a little spite. But because it marked something rare, accountability, the kind that actually hits the people responsible, not just their shell organizations or lawyers, a real public reckoning. As part of the settlement, the court also awarded me $680,000 in damages. That included legal costs, reputational harm, defamation, and a not insignificant chunk for emotional and mental distress. I used part of it to buy a small office space downtown. Red brick, black trim, unapologetically aesthetic, just to irritate anyone still sensitive to that kind of thing. The rest went into launching a firm that had been floating around in the back of my mind since this circus began. HOA Rights Legal Group. We don't do divorce, immigration, or DUI. We do one thing. We keep homeowner associations from steamrolling the people they're supposed to serve. We handle fake fines, document forgeries, power-mad presidents, and quiet tyranny wrapped in bylaws. Business is, as you might imagine, booming. The day the court officially ordered Karen's home seized and auctioned to begin restitution payouts, I drove by her street. Not to gloat, just to see. The Queen of Briarwood sign that used to hang under her porch light was gone. In its place was a government-issued sticker, bright orange and impossible to ignore. Property seized, under court order. Fitting. I didn't get out, just watched for a moment, then turned Scout's leash in my hand and kept walking. Briarwood Park was quieter now. Some neighbors still avoided my eyes when I passed, but others nodded, even smiled. I got a few thank you notes in the mail. Anonymous, sure, but genuine. A kid even left a hand-drawn picture of my house in my mailbox, complete with a speech bubble that said, "Not ugly at all." I hung it on my fridge. Funny thing, after the HOA disbanded, property values didn't tank. If anything, they ticked up. People could paint their front doors whatever color they damn well wanted. One guy even installed solar panels. Karen would have had an aneurysm. Justice didn't just win. It moved in, kicked off its boots, and stayed for dinner. I never expected a sign to become a local landmark, but that's what happened. After everything settled, after Karen was sentenced to 10 years and the rest of her board scattered like roaches in daylight, I ordered a small custom plaque and mounted it right on the front gate, bold white letters etched in black steel. Built without your permission, protected by law. Welcome to the house where HOAs go to die. People took photos of it. Realtors started advertising nearby listings with the phrase, "Next to the Marshall property, HOA free." A local podcast even featured the story, calling it the brick house that broke the system. At first, I thought the attention would die down, but it didn't. Turns out I'd hit a nerve that ran a lot deeper than I imagined. Emails started pouring in, calls too, from across Texas, then across the country. People with stories, just like mine. And worse. HOA presidents locking up basketball hoops. Residents being fined for overly expressive seasonal decor. Elderly couples threatened with liens for planting native grass instead of HOA-approved turf. One guy was fined $4,000 for putting a flagpole on his lawn on Veterans Day. I couldn't ignore it. I didn't want to. So I expanded the firm, hired 2 young attorneys straight out of SMU law. Smart kids. One of them, Clarissa, had actually grown up in a neighborhood where the HOA tried to evict her grandfather over a garden gnome. No joke. We took case after case, state by state, challenging illegal bylaws, exposing fraudulent elections, defending people who didn't know they had a voice until someone answered the phone and said, "Yeah, we believe you." I testified twice in front of the Texas legislature. Helped draft what would become the Homeowner Defense and Transparency Act, new state-level protections for people harassed by their own associations, required financial disclosures, election monitors, fines for fraudulent enforcement. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And something is where all revolutions begin. I didn't do it to be a hero. Honestly, I just wanted to build a house in peace. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about me and started being about everyone else who got a fake fine for painting their shutters the wrong shade of beige. Briarwood Park? The name still exists on maps, but the HOA? Dead. The former common areas were absorbed by the county. The pool is now public. Someone even repurposed the old HOA office into a community garden. One of the same people who once left me nasty Facebook comments now brings zucchini to my doorstep every Saturday. Go figure. Karen tried to appeal. Of course she did. Her new lawyer argued she was pressured by her position and overwhelmed with responsibility. The appellate judge read her financial statements, saw the photo of her doing yoga on a Floridian beach during her so-called research summit, and denied it in under 10 minutes. She still writes letters. To the court, to the press, even to me. I don't read them. They get filed, unopened, in a drawer I call Exhibits in Delusion. Every now and then, I sit out on the back porch, same spot where this whole mess began. Same dark shingles overhead, same clean brick lines they once called aesthetic aggression. But now, the silence feels earned. Sometimes neighbors join me, sometimes lawyers I've trained, sometimes no one at all. But always Scout curled up at my feet, watching the wind push through the trees that still don't match the approved landscaping palette. Good. Let them clash. Let them bloom wild. I didn't set out to make an example of anyone, but I sure as hell finished the job. So, if you're reading this in a house you paid for, on land you legally own, and someone in a polo shirt with a clipboard tells you you're breaking the spirit of the neighborhood, just remember, you're not alone. And you're not powerless. You've got a right to your bricks, a right to your roof, and a right to peace. Everything else, let them try.